Romane is a licensed clinician, psychologist, and also social worker, and also a pastor who will be uniquely able to answer these questions from her experience as a woman, as a social worker, and also as someone who has some background in, I guess we'll call it the claw, or, dealing with, let's say, spirituality. How about that? So, Romane, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's been a minute, but I'm so glad to have you here. So, you and I had talked about this topic the other day, right? And I know you were being somewhat facetious when you said, when I posed a question to you, you said, well, men are 120% responsible, right? So I know you're being a bit somewhat facetious. But drawing on your experience as a woman, right? And also in terms of your work, with social work, and also as a member of the clergy, do you think women feel that men are primarily responsible for the trauma that they suffer?
First, I think it's important for us to just take a minute to clarify exactly what trauma is, right? So, trauma is not the event, right? Trauma is how we respond to the event, which means two women, same age, right? Same background, experience the same event. One walks away and she's unscarred. The other one suffers trauma, right? Which could ultimately be like PTSD or something. But trauma is how we respond. So are men responsible for how we respond? No. But do men put us in positions where we may suffer trauma or traumatic response? Absolutely. Women have been the subject of traumatic response due to events that were imposed by men since the beginning of time, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I know a lot of men who may be listening to this, of course, they're going to be somewhat defensive because, typically we play blame, it's her, it's not, no, it's him. But if we think of it on a broader scale, if we think of some of the trauma women suffer in other countries, in places like India and some other Muslim countries, there are honor killings where if a woman is considered to be impure, she's not a virgin on her wedding night, or she brings shame on the family, they kill them. Some countries, women aren't allowed to vote, to hold office, to own a home, to even drive a car. And in this country, women have made probably enormous strides. When you consider, 60 years ago, the life of a woman was to take care of a husband. At some point, probably in, I guess, maybe the late 50s, early 60s, women began to leave the home in mass and go out into the workplace. But in this country, men were not very receptive to that. Today, right, what do you think? Do you think men are more receptive today? Or do you think it just hit?
I think that men have learned to go along, to give the impression that they get along, right? But I think that the conversations that take place with men when we're not in the room about us are not the same conversations that take place when we're in the room.
Well, yeah. But I think that's with everybody, right? Because women probably have conversations about men, right? That they're probably not going to hold that same conversation in the presence of men. And probably some of that conversation may have to do with some of the trauma that they suffered. I'm always on social media because, I do blogging and also just looking for ideas for the radio show. lot of the posts that I see, primarily from women, it suggests that there is some scarring, some emotional, and maybe some psychological scarring, right? That may be due to things they endured, maybe during childhood, maybe as they started to date, maybe from marriage or living with someone, but I think what's important for women to keep in mind is that these men that are scarring them, that hurting them, these men also hurt them. I don't know, if you're not able to deal with your own issues, right? Bringing someone else into the relationship is only going to create pain for someone. And unfortunately, in many cases, it's the woman that suffers. Would you agree with that?
I agree, and I think what happens is, and I think you and I have even touched on this when we talked about, you have broken women raising sons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if broken people produce broken people.
Absolutely.
So you have broken women raising broken sons, and then broken sons going out. And after a mom and a dad, who's the next person that kind of cultivates a confidence,
Mm-hmm.
right, that a woman should have? The feeling of feeling beautiful. After her parents, the next person in line is her spouse or her mate or whoever she's involved with romantically. But if he can't do that, then who's left to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's broken. Now he's dealing with women. And his relations with a woman are not healthy relationships, right? And then they get together and they have children. And now we have two broken and damaged people raising another generation. And it just kind of keeps perpetuating itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we were talking very broadly and saying that this wasn't culturally specified, but it's even more prominent in our culture, right? Because you have parents raising children in poverty, you have single mothers raising children, right? So it's not one layer, not one layer of issues, right? It's layer on top of layer on top of layer of issues with mom, who's trying to, by default, because we talked about that, and that's important, that whole default piece. They forced into these positions by default, single parenting, had a household, trying to provide, trying to, what's that old commercial? Bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan and be super mom. And they're trying to do all these things. And who's caring for mom?
Right.
So mom is taking care of these sons. And no matter what we do as women, we can't raise a man. We can't teach you how to be a man.
Right, that's true.
So it's a cycle that keeps perpetuating itself. And even more so in our culture.
I talk to a lot of people, and I think that, yes, in our culture, I think that the media tends to focus its attention on, people of color. But these are issues that affect everyone, right? And, when we start talking like on a broader scale, you go to India, Pakistan, places like that, and, these women are killed because they were considered impure or they brought shame on the family. You go to places, parts of Africa, it's female circumcision. Whereas the mentality is, well, the sex act is only to be pleasurable for the man. So because of that, we are going to mutilate this woman or this young child. And, this is not something that's done in the hospital. We're not talking about aseptic technique. We're talking about, the woman comes around who's been trained in basic being a butcher for the most part, who has, the mother and the other women in the ethnic group hold this child down and mutilate her. We don't think about that in this country. We think of about strictly our relationships, male and female in this country, right? And we think in this country, well, you know what? It's not just men, it's women as well. But I guess if we look at it in terms of, for women, they talk about the glass ceiling, right? They talk about how up until the 1970s, I don't know if you know this, but in this country, women could own property in the 70s. They didn't have a credit card. You had to have the permission of your husband, even open a bank account. Those are things we don't even consider today, but the 70s wasn't that long ago. In this country, women just got the right to vote 100 years ago. Even black men could vote before Caucasian women in this country. So, yes, there have been rules in place that, of course, suppressed women, right? And I think part of that goes back to biblical concepts, right? When Adam and Eve supposedly committed this cardinal sin, Adam got off lightly. What would that be? So, I think the concept that people develop is that, well, God is sexist, right? Because Eve, now she has to have painful birth. Now she has to have a cycle every month, right? Adam was just told, okay, Adam, pack your bag. You got to get out. You're being evicted. But she received the majority of the blame. And since then, right, I think that women have been sort of put into that box, right, as being the ones who are most culpable, right? But Adam should have known better. He was there first, wasn't he?
He was there first, but we can't forget that, people, men, wrote this book, the Bible, right? So
exactly. That's the point.
Is it God inspired? Yes, but it's impossible for something to just be God inspired. It's still a person.
Absolutely.
That's being inspired.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to use some Holy Spirit, right, to be able to discern, what sounds like this is God and what's not. But are you right that this is going on from biblical times forward? Absolutely. And we live in a society now where we're talking about women, but the society that we live in now, suppression is what they do. Right? They don't just suppress women; they want to suppress everybody. So, but women have suffered this, and the women that I see in therapy, and trauma is an area that I've always been very interested in. The women that I see in therapy that have the greatest trauma is due to childhood abuse, childhood events, right? Sexual trauma, abandonment. The sexual trauma piece is big because sometimes people grow up in these families and you can't talk about what happened, right? So now this they have to carry this out into the real world. And when we come into a therapeutic setting and they're there for traumatic events, that's always one of the biggest things that comes up. At some point in the therapeutic process, that's disclosed. So, are women suppressed? Yes, we're suppressed. Have women suffered traumatic events? Yes, that being one of them. In our society, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that women have been abused. In the workplace, they don't really want to hear that women are sexually harassed. And not to say that the roles can't be reversed, of course they can, but they don't really want to hear that. If you are in the workplace and you're being sexually harassed and you mention it or you expose it, you are then labeled, right? Everybody knows that you're the person who said that there was some sexual harassment that took place, right? So you're shunned, right? What do you think happens where in every dynamic, a woman who wants to have a voice, right? Who wants to say, hello, see me, I matter, right? Or I have an opinion, or if she's shunned constantly, or in your words, suppressed,
Mhm.
what does that produce? Coupled with all of those extra things that we discussed that we have to take on like these, what happens?
You know, I think that I agree with most of what you said. I think today men are being held accountable, right? More so than in previous times. Before, sexual harassment was pretty much expected, right? The stewardess on the plane, she knew she was going to get pinched, just slapped on the behind, right? You know, it was, I guess, just part of doing business, right? You knew that. It was almost expected. Doesn't make it right. But nowadays, you see people like Epstein going to jail, Weinstein going to jail, R. Kelly just convicted, Bill Cosby spent a couple of years in jail. So I think that men are being held accountable, and I think that one of the problems in this country is a lack of balance. There's either too much in one direction or too little in the other. So for years, and I can remember as a kid watching an old show called Father Knows Best. And it focused on, Robert Young was the main character. And, his wife in a supporting role, and that's all she was, a supporting role. She stayed at home. She got up in the morning, got dressed, dressed very nicely, put on an apron, went in the kitchen and made the eggs and bacon and had the coffee waiting for when he came into the room. And everything was shown through the eyes of a man, right? As if she's just a prop on the set. Nowadays, it's just the opposite. When, say, a man and woman are being interviewed, the man sits basically quiet, and the woman does all the talking. And on occasion, he may interject. One such interview I remember distinctly was Mike Tyson. When he was being interviewed, I think it was by Barbara Walters, and he had just married Robin Williams. And of course, she came on to talk about Mike's abusive behavior. And, for Mike Tyson to be such a ferocious fighter in the ring, he sat there like Mike had been medicated. And perhaps he was. But, that's the new, I guess, paradigm. Instead of having balance where people are on equal footing, it's always one has to be weighted heavily, more heavily than the other. I think that's one of the big problems.
Is it really weighted, or is it just to give the appearance of those people? Because guess what? Even with those few cases, right, that you mentioned, people who being prosecuted, thousands of cases that there are that go, without
unreported.
Yeah, absolutely. And employers now announce that they expect workplaces to be free of sexual harassment, and they are advocating for work environments that are not hostile, right, or oppressive. That's an announcement. Right? Is that really what's happening in the workplace? No.
Well, I'll tell you something.
And I'm telling you that as a woman.
Well, I'll tell you something I noticed last year. I was watching the NCAA rather, women's basketball championship. And I think it was maybe a game or two before the championship game. And one of the players went into the men's locker room to see what their locker room looked like as opposed to the female. Actually, the weight room, right? And they went into the men's athletic area, and it was outfitted with all of the latest equipment, weights, free weights, machines, treadmills. It was a state-of-the-art gym. So then she went into the female athletic training area, and she photographed it and put it on social media. And I think there was a couple of free weights, and a treadmill. So now here you have athletes who are all generating billions of dollars for the universities and colleges. Why is there such a disparity in the facilities for women as opposed to men? And we're not talking about, we make a big deal of watching news earlier, and they were talking about China's human rights abuses. What about the rights of people here? How are we going to go to China and say, look, we don't agree with how you are treating your citizens, yet what about Ahmaud Arbery's? What about his rights? What about the rights of Dante Wright? And what about a woman's right to choose? Roe v. Wade, for many, many years, Roe v. Wade has been threatened. But now you have people in place in the legislature who are probably going to do away with Roe v. Wade, with the right to choose, despite the fact that a woman may have been raped or a victim of incest.
When you talk about disparities, see, we want to put this micro lens and we just say there's only disparities concerning women.
Mm-hmm.
But this country practices disparities across the board.
Yes, they do.
And so what I would say is, when you say why? Well, why? Because people are making decisions and people they're not making decisions that demonstrate equality, right? So we know that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I say to people, even about race, and this would be applicable when it comes to gender as well, is that in order for men to say, women need to be treated better, women need to be treated equally, women need to be given equal opportunity, women need to be given the workout room needs to be equal to what we have in the men's workout room. It's the same thing when you deal with race. In order for somebody to say that, they have to be willing to relinquish the unearned advantage, because men have an unearned advantage. Our white counterparts have an unearned advantage, right?
And that's what I was going to say, because I think I said to you the other day, when you say men, what men? Because I understand that a lot of men within our communities are broken, right? They came up as, seeing violence in the home, violence in the street, right? These young men grow up angry. They grow up without a real connection, because some of them, and being a mother is so important, right? Because if your mother nurtures you, right, you develop a connection, right, with not just your mother, but other human beings. But when you don't have that, you grow up to become a cold person, a person that doesn't really have a connection or any real emotion to another human being. You've been hurt, and all you respond to is that hurt. And what happens is you hurt other people. Now that's what happens in our community. But on a larger scale, it's not really us, black men, brown men, even poor men, who are making these decisions. It's not us who said, okay, we're making billions of dollars in TV rights from these basketball games, but we're going to give these women, 2 weights and a hot dog. But we're going to give the men, right, a complete weight room and a steak dinner. It's not, for the most part, it's not us who are saying, okay, women can only climb so high, on a corporate ladder. Those aren't decisions that we're making. In fact, from our perspective, we are fighting the same oppression. We're fighting the same discrimination. Yes, women have been denied opportunity in this country, but so have black men, so have brown men, so have poor men, right? But I think what happens is, for a lot of men, they internalize what's going on. Right? They don't know how to process the anger, the frustration, right, that builds, and they go home and they take it out on people in the community, the people in the home, the wife, the girlfriend, the daughter, right? And of course, it's like a self-perpetuating cycle, right? You know, if it happened with daddy, it may happen with son, right? You know, the thing to do is to somehow find ways to break the cycle. Now, I mean, that would be more your specialty, right?
Breaking the cycle. Well, first of all, we have to first acknowledge that there's a problem, right?
Right.
Then after we acknowledge that there's a problem, we have to relinquish some control.
Right.
We have to relinquish this unearned advantage, right? So in our case, in our culture, women have started to transcend to places in the workplace that our men couldn't reach. You know why? Because it was easier for them to deal with us than it was for them to deal with our men, right? Because they see our men and they say our men are angry, our men are aggressive, right? So we first have to have people relinquish this unearned advantage. When, let's be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you had unearned advantage, if you had an advantage over everybody else, right? As much as you may want to help them, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody said, this is going to require you to relinquish your advantage, right? Are you going to do that? And we know you're a stand-up
I like
guy.
to think that I would, right? You know, because for me, you know, I gave a church a long time ago, right? But I do operate on the spiritual principles, right? And I believe that the universe gives and it takes. And I think if what I have, I do not share it, it's going to be taken from me anyway. So I guess that translates into God gives you gifts, right? If you do not properly use those gifts, God will take those gifts from you and give them to somebody who will. So I like to think that I would, you know, be willing to relinquish.
So first off, I refuse to sit here tonight and to just be passed along. I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, let's get the word, and let's see what the word says about that.
Right.
But we just have to acknowledge, though, that the Bible says that the gifts come without repentance, right?
Right.
So you're going to have those gifts, whether you do the right thing or whether you don't do the right thing. They don't change, right? But you're a stand-up guy, and you're someone who is always concerned about your community. You're concerned about the women in our community. These are things that, as long as I've known you, these have been at the top of your pecking list.
Oh,
right?
thank you.
So you're a stand-up guy. But in the real world, people aren't going to relinquish that. That's why we can't dismantle racism. Because in order for us to dismantle racism, white people have to relinquish unearned advantage. And they're not going to do that. Because guess what? I can't say that most of us would do it if the roles were reversed. However, when we look at our women and you say, or in our families, and you say, what can we do to stop this? We, number one, have to admit that there's a problem. Number two, we have to stop and remove this negative stigma that we've placed on therapy, right? Everybody needs therapy. So that's number one, right? You can't shun people in our community and say they're crazy because they're going to go and get help. Because it's like you say, these are broken people that have come from broken homes, right? And somebody, if nothing else, they need somebody to sit down with them and help them even process what happened to them as children, right?
You know what somebody once said? Somebody once said, we're all crazy. Some of us just need medication.
There it is.
But, you know, we live in a crazy world, right? Especially in this country, right? Things have been turned upside down, right? You know, I think there's a scripture that says, even what you may finish seeing it, right? So stuff that we once knew was wrong, once rejected, now it's become part of our daily lives, right? And I think for men and women, right, the divisions that have long been there, I guess maybe what used to be a crack is now somewhat of a chasm, because you said that, you know, women have been accepted into the boardroom. Yes, black men are looked at as being big, burly beasts who are aggressive, right, and who are threatening and who are frightening to others. So we're not gonna let you in, right? But I'm gonna let her in, right? And what happens is some brothers have a difficult time accepting your success, right? Sometimes they view it as a threat, right? You know, everybody, unfortunately, it's just something that is sick, part of our way of living. Everybody wants to be better than somebody else, right? You know, we could live across the street from one another, same socioeconomic status, but I'm better than you because my car's a V6, yours is a V4, right? You know, and that's what we're taught in this country, that, you know, for poor people down in the South prior to the civil rights movement, you know, look, you're raising pigs, I'm raising pigs, right? You take yours to the market, and of course, because your skin is light, you're going to get a higher price at the market. But realistically, we're both engaged in the same activity. But I'm better, inherently better, because my skin is light. That's it. I'm not smarter, I'm not faster. You know, I can't leap tall buildings in a single bound. But, you know, because of skin color, I'm better, right? And that's what is ingrained in this country. And for men, right, the biblical nonsense, you know, about, you know, women are responsible for this, you know, for this original sin. Women are punished heavily, or more heavily than their male counterparts. And then, of course, you know, in certain books of the Bible, it wouldn't even mention women. Exodus, it counted the men. How do you not count your wives, your mothers, your daughters? You know, so we have that, I guess, that mentality, right, that we have an air of superiority because at some point we got the Y chromosome, right, and grew a penis. Now we are superior. But, you know, in African tradition and culture, you had to learn to be a man. You just didn't grow up, you know, and just say, well, I'm going to go out, I'm going to be a man, and I'm going to take a bride. No, you're not. You're going to prove it. You're not going to prove it to the village, to the women, and to yourself, that you have the confidence, right, and the wherewithal to take care of this family, to protect this village, to protect our tradition, and most of all, protect the women and the children. We don't do that. Unfortunately. Yeah. So, you know, we have a lot of young men that want to be men, but have no blueprint for being a man.
Because the women by default are raising them as single parents. Right? They're raising them. And here's a good example. I see a whole bunch of women on Facebook on Father's Day wishing other women happy Father's Day.
Right.
And somebody deleted me off their Facebook and stopped speaking to me and everything because I said, why are you wishing other women happy Father's Day? They're not fathers, they're mothers. Why are you doing that? They could be good mothers, they could be great mothers, they could be phenomenal mothers, they could be extraordinary mothers, but they can't be a father.
Right.
So I could be the best mother that I could be. And my children, their dad and I divorced. One was 16 and the other one was, I think, 12 when we divorced, right? So I was forced by default into that single parenting role, right? And not to toot my own horn, I think I was a great mom, right?
You did a wonderful job.
But I could not teach them how to be men. I could teach them what I think a man should do from a woman's perspective, right? But I couldn't teach them how to tie a tie, right? I couldn't go into the bathroom and teach them what to do in the bathroom if I needed to. They were big about it. But these are things that women can't do. So when we say, what's up, why we don't have men that are assuming this headship role, right? Because really that's what it's for, right? It's supposed to be.
Arguably.
Well, listen, I'm not a woman's liver, so you have the wrong one. I love and embrace the essence of who I am as a woman. I'm real comfortable in it, right? And that doesn't mean that I can't hang with the best man in the boardroom. I run a business, right? Yeah. So I can, whatever a man can do corporately, I could probably do it better. but I'm looking for a man that I'm dealing with. I want him to be the leader.
Right.
Because guess what? If I am the leader in the boardroom and I am the leader at work and in my practice here and at church, right? When I'm with my man, I want him to be the leader. I want you to lead me, right? I don't want to lead you. I don't even want it to be balanced. I want you to be able to tell me, listen, you need to just sit down, stop it, and sit. A man needs to be able to do that. A man needs to look and see where there's lack. A man needs to look at even the young brothers in the community and see where there's a lack. And go and take a brother by his hand. I saw somebody a picture on Facebook with some random older gentleman who was in the train station helping a young man tie his tie, teaching him how to tie his tie. That. That's awesome.
And it is. And one of the problems that men have as it relates to pretty much all aspects of our lives. I was blessed to have my father in my life from day one. A lot of men don't have that. And because of, we came out of cycles of violence. I'm talking going back generations to when we were enslaved. We came out of cycles of violence and terror and fear, and we were stripped of everything, right? Our names, our cultures, religions, everything, and told, well, you came here with nothing, you came from nothing. And now what happens is a lot of men, and let me give you an example. If you go to the circus, right, you see this man, a lion tamer. He goes into the lion enclosure with a whip, another whip, and he cracks that whip, and the lion responds. Well, those lions don't realize they're lions anymore. No man is going to go into the plains of Africa, onto the plains of Africa with a whip, crack it at a real lion, and expect not to become hamburger. For Black men, we've forgotten who we are.
We've been conditioned.
Absolutely, right? And part of that condition that we've undergone is the suppression of women. See, that was not part of our culture or tradition in Africa, because there were many women who led Egypt and who led civilizations in Africa, who were the generals, who were the queens, didn't have a king, right? And these women were extremely powerful. I mean, there were women like Queen Nzinga, who fought the Europeans and kept them at bay for years. They wanted to come into Africa and take more slaves and take more land, but it was a woman who was fighting the hell out of them, pushing them back, right? So, and she was respected, revered, and honored, right? There was no thought that a woman warrior. Yes, it was part of our tradition. A woman leading the country, we think that it's insane. Here, I talk to women when I guess 2016 when Hillary was running, and they said, I'll never vote for a woman. But why? Oh, we're crazy, right? We'll make decisions based on emotion, right? You think men do that? You think all men are rational? That we don't make foolish decisions based on maybe jealousy and anger? It happens all the time, right? But I think even women are conditioned to accept certain behaviors.
I don't think that we're conditioned to accept certain behaviors. I think, again, because we've been forced into these roles by default, a woman desires a man who can take back some of these things that we've been forced to do by default.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're looking for. Women are looking for, and that's where the headship thing comes in. Not headship in so much as, you're here and I'm here, but headship in your ability to be the head of the household. Because men are still screaming that they're the king and they're castle.
Mm-hmm.
But, in Roman A's words, you got to pay the cost to be the boss.
Well, absolutely.
So I think that women aren't, it's not so much that we've been conditioned, it's that we're achieving so much now that a lot of those things, they're just not accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're just not willing to accept it. So now we've become bitter,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what they say. That's what
Mm-hmm.
they say. They're bitter. They're taking on masculine traits, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to be the man, they want to be in control. But nobody's acknowledging that this is what everybody forced them to do. So this is what you've cultivated. This is what our culture, our society, and I'm not just talking about us as African American people. I'm talking about our society,
Mm-hmm.
America, this capitalistic society that we live in, who suppresses anyone for gain,
Mm-hmm.
right? Wherever they need this.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, we're coming into boardrooms. Make no mistake, unless a woman is really in tune to who she is, right? She can go on a power trip real easily by being accepted into the boardroom. Nowhere in the mix is she taking into account that she's in the boardroom because they know she's easier to control than a man.
Sometimes. But, we got about 15 minutes left, so I want to open up the phone line. The number here is 1-888-304-4401. If you have questions or you want to make a comment related to our topic tonight, please call in and share with us. So now, I think we're kind of talking about the same thing, right? When I say that we are, women have been conditioned to accept certain behaviors, right? I think that, so a young woman growing up in the inner city, right? She comes out into the world idealistic, right? She comes out saying, oh, I'm going to marry the prince who comes on the big white horse and who's going to scoop me up and take me to this castle. We're going to live happily ever after, right? Now, of course, I'm exaggerating, right? But a lot of women come out, with this idealistic belief that, she's going to find Mr. Right, and he's going to love her and honor her and respect her and all those wonderful things that you read about and that you see on TV. But then reality sets in, right? So you come out and you realize, okay, you know what? This guy isn't for me. These are the people I'm going to told me to avoid, right? The guys hanging out on the porch. You don't really give them much of the focus. Your focus now is school and all this other stuff. Well, after you have achieved, or you reach a level of achievement, you realize, I'm not in a relationship. But the guys that you would date, right? Maybe they have no issue. Maybe they are intimidated by you, right? So eventually, what happens is maybe your high standards begin to come down dramatically. So now the dude on the corner isn't as unattractive as he was before. You know, they used to say those women were stuck up, right? That's a term we used back in the day, right? Stuck up. But were they?
Stuck up and so much as they wouldn't be able to find.
Right. I mean, it's not about, that's how we term it.
Right.
The label is being stuck up.
Right.
The reality is they wanted something better.
Right.
Right. But then they begin to realize, you know, this world is not what you envision.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's some harsh reality. Right. And, you know, a lot of women of, I guess, my mother's generation, right, when they would go to church, the men would eat first. You know what I mean? Why? You know, like, that's the role that some women take, the subservient role, right? But why?
Because that's what they've been conditioned.
See, that's what I meant. That's what I meant.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
They've
that's
been
what I meant.
conditioned to believe that. But guess what? If women had a mother, if a mother was there who wasn't broken,
Mm-hmm.
and a mother was there who was centered and in tune with who she is, right, and comfortable, like I said, with saying, I'm going to embrace the essence of who I am. I'm a woman. I'm softer. I'm more of a nurturer. I can embrace all of that, but that's not going to take away from what I'm capable of.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have a mother that's teaching them that, then you will see that. But that's like if you go to the ATM machine to take $50 out and you didn't put any money in that account, you can't take $50 out. So if you have a mother there and nobody put that in, what's the child going to pull from?
Right.
So then that subservient role continues, because allowing a man to lead doesn't mean a woman has to be subservient.
Mm-hmm.
That means I'm going to allow you to be the husband, right? And I'm going to allow you to be a man, right? Because I raised two men, right? And I've heard them say, you have to be so careful with all of this women's lib and women's power, because it can almost destroy a man if you're raising a man, right? Because you still want him to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want the mother to soften him so much, right? And do this thing, what did you say, this balance thing,
Mm-hmm.
where by the time you send him out into the world, he is docile, right?
Well, that's what I meant about the lion not knowing he's a lion anymore,
Right.
not knowing his nature, right? You know, the nature of defending pride, right? Yes, a lot of men don't realize that anymore, right? Because just as women have been, I guess, socialized to accept certain things, so have men, right? And a lot of us, we come along and we develop, I guess, a belief, and it's taught in schools, right? And it's always, I guess, it's subliminally suggested that we're not as good as others, right? So some of us develop that way because, well, society wants us to think like that, right? That we will stay in our lane. So when eventually what happens is we create our own things, our own destructive things. And, you know,
The self-fulfilling prophecy.
right. And, you know, what bothers me is in this country, we have a major problem with human trafficking. And, you know, when the Europeans first came to Africa, their ships, of course, were, I guess, off the coast. And they would use small boats to come on to shore because, of course, there wasn't enough draft to get the ship all the way, you know, along the beach. Once they got off of these boats, these landing boats, they stayed on the beach. Europeans did not have a natural defense against malaria. We did. In this country, what's called sickle cell anemia in Africa is a natural defense against malaria. So what they would do is they would take black men to go into the interior beyond the beach and capture other black women. And in this society, what you have is young black men capturing other young black women and bringing them to the modern day beach, which we call the trap house. What have we learned? You know, I mean, we did this, we enslaved our own, or assisted in enslavement of our own, and here we are, centuries later, and we're doing it again. You know, I mean, there's just so much work that needs to be done. You know, and to do that to a young black woman, right? Think of the damage that we're doing. Not just, I mean, not just physically, but psychologically and emotionally and spiritually. You take this young girl, her family, her friends, everything she's ever known, and you place her in this horrific condition of being forced into prostitution at a young age. So, you know, and unfortunately, it's us. It's us who are out there grabbing these women off the street. It's us who are loading them in a van and chaining them, and it's us taking them to the trap house. You know, so I guess that is in some way an answer to the question: are we responsible for the trauma? And in that respect, most certainly we are.
You guys are responsible for the trauma because it's being protected. So we're not just going to put it on the wheels and you guys are following. This is the hand that's been dealt, and until somebody breaks the cycle, then it's going to continue. But it's continuing again by default. Not because black men want to grow up and be aggressive and hostile and get involved with perpetuating the cycle of abuse, right? And trauma. They don't want to do that. But that's all they know.
That's true.
So we can't, again, we have to start to promote wellness, spirit, soul, and body in our community. We have to begin to advocate for therapy. We have to begin to advocate again for a family structure. We have to begin to dismantle some of these things that religiosity has taught our community, right? Because religiosity is going to keep us in bondage.
Oh, that's very strong.
Okay. So we have to begin to dismantle some of these things. And again, it has to be more people, more men like you, who say, I'm going to take an active role. How about this? I'm not just going to show up. I'm going to show up and be present, right? And I'm going to put my hand to the plow and try to make a difference in some young man's life. And I always say that if I can, in my practice, if I can just reach one woman that contacts me or comes to the agency that I'm working with, and they come and we sit, and after 3 months or 4 months of therapy, I see a difference. I see some healing. I see some wholeness, right? And guess what? Mission accomplished.
So that brings me to my next question. In your practice, how many men do you see on average?
Probably 30% of my patients are men.
Okay. Do you find it easier or more difficult to relate to?
Oh, I don't find it either. I think it's all about, because you could be the best therapist in the world, right? You have to find a fit to establish a healthy relationship. So it's really not about, do I not have the ability to relate? The thing is, does my client feel comfortable enough to disclose, right? And then in turn, am I able with this client to not practice transference? Am I able to hear what's going on? And it doesn't evoke my own issues, right? So that's something that happens gradually. And after you meet with someone, a couple of times, you either know that this is a good helping fit or it's not. I'm not going to be able to help this person. Maybe we just come from two different walks of life, and I can't have that client feel comfortable enough to disclose. If they can't disclose, right, then what am I doing?
Right.
So I don't think it has anything to do with chemistry. I think it has to do with is it a good fit, right? And that's the key to a good therapeutic relationship. Is it a good fit? And I have some male clients where they would never change that. And how about this? I have some white male clients who would never change that. And then I have some African American urban female clients who would never change that. And they vocalize this to me. You know, Roman, we love you. I'm so glad. Da, 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 da. So it's about a good fit. It's about when I talk, do you hear what you need? Right? Not can I relate, but when I talk, can you hear what you need? Right? And when you disclose, do I have something to offer? What you're here for? So it's just a good
fit. Okay. Well, you know, we're almost at that time. You know, I mean, an hour goes by so quickly.
And I didn't have a panic attack.
You didn't. I'm so glad you didn't, right? Because I'm not a therapist, so we had to fix them up real quick. But you know, this is a topic that we're going to have to revisit again, because from treating people that once you open up and once you begin to disclose, right, you can't take that back. You have to continue on, opening up and disclosing to get to the root of the problem and to begin to heal and begin healing process. So at this venture, we've only scratched the surface, right? There may have been people listening who really wanted to call in and talk about or give their take, because there's a lot of people right now who are hurting, right? And who feel as if, yes, a lot of what I'm feeling is based on my interaction with a man or men, right? But just don't feel comfortable enough, to open up. So that's something that we're going to have to come back and discuss again. And I hope you join me again, because this has been a good hour.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to join you. I'm going to have...
a panic attack?
No, not
okay.
Tonight. I did good. I did good.
You did very good.
I'm going to have a trauma workshop in February. Maybe the next time I come on, I'll have the exact date for you. But for anyone who didn't feel like they could pick the phone up and call tonight, like they need to know that I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
So you can reach me if you email me at the subservient@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can talk or arrange a conversation. Right? You don't have to go through it by yourself, and it's okay to reach that point. This is what I said: find it, face it, feel it, forgive it, and then you can forge ahead. Right? So
right.
They don't have to stay stuck. You just gotta take that first step, and then God will do the rest. So, yeah, I'd love to come back.
Okay, well, we're going to have you again, and I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, folks, good night.